Good morning, everybody. Thank you, everybody, to attend this event. My name is Renato Tischauer. I'm at the board of the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce. First of all, I want to thank FAST for supporting and sponsoring this event. And I will read the introduction of Professor Virgilio. Would you like to sit down? So I try to memorize his resume so that I don't have to read it, but it's impossible. So I'm going to read it. Professor Virgilio Viana is forestry engineer, PhD in biology from Harvard University, postdoc in sustainable development from the University of Florida, professor of the Department of Forest Science of the ESALQ at the University of São Paulo from 2003, Secretary of the Environment and Sustainable Development of the Amazon State in Brazil from 2003-2008, former President of the Paulista Association of Forest Engineers and the Brazilian Ethnobiology Society and Ethnoecology. He is currently Director of the Sustainable Amazon Foundation, postgraduate collaborating professor of the National Amazon Research Institute, coordinator of the United Nations Initiative Sustainable Commission for Sustainable Development, of the Political Academy of Sciences of the Vatican, chairman of the board of directors of the Amazon Bioeconomy Alliance. Well, our time is finished. So anyway, welcome Professor Virgilio, and I certainly you enjoy his presentation.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Anna. Well, thank you all for coming, and thanks for the Chamber to host us once again. We've been here a couple of times, and we're very glad to have a partnership with the Chamber of Commerce here in the States. The subject of our conversation today is the COP, right? The COP30, which is going to take place in Brazil, in Belém, downstream from where we're based. We're based in Manaus, so traveling from Manaus to Belém is a short trip, 5 days by boat. 4 hours is short. We work in communities that are sometimes 15 days away from Manaus. Imagine lunch and dinner, breakfast times 15. So we work in very remote areas. FAS is the largest civil society organization in the Amazon. We work in these areas with forest peoples for many, many years, 16 years, 28 million hectares that are include indigenous peoples' lands, protected areas, and also slums of places like Manaus and Iquitos. We work in other Amazon countries as well, not only in Brazil. For those of you who follow me on LinkedIn, I'm very active to try to protect the headwaters of the Amazon River in Peru. I'm very proud also to have a partnership with Brazil Foundation, here represented by Rebecca, who is the executive director or president. She leads the institution, together with Will Lenders, who is also the chair here at the Chamber. So that's so much for the institutional part. The idea that we have is, are we going to have a video on?
Yes.
Yes, so it is just to show you a little bit of the work that we do as a sort of an inspiration for the discussion on COP, because the COP, I think, has many angles to it, and I'm going to explore them after you get some images and see what are the things that can be done and are being done in the Amazon. So, maybe the light.
Dá tempo de acontecer muita coisa, muita mesmo. Nesse período, uma castanheira já germinou, criou troncos grossos, já pode dar frutos. Ela se aterrou firme ao chão e é conhecida pelo caboclo que passa para pescar de canoa e escuta o ruído do macaco bugioso passar por ali. Em 15 anos, uma comunidade pode conquistar o que não tinha: saúde, educação, qualidade de vida, prosperidade.
A paz, ela não nos enxergou apenas como números, ela nos enxergou como a essência cabocla, essência indígena, quilombola, ribeirinha, e transformou todos os nossos conhecimentos de saberes e fazeres da floresta em potência. Às vezes as pessoas falavam assim: poxa, ninguém olha pra gente hoje, nós estamos sendo vistos, né, pelas pessoas.
Em 15 anos, mentes e corpos se transformam, realidades mudam. E em 15 anos, a fada esteve ali, presente na floresta e fora dela. Por ela. Esteve ali, de frente para a castanheira. Essa que agora pessoas mostram para os turistas e com essa renda sobem de vida.
A minha relação hoje com a Amazônia se tornou amorosa, porque tive a oportunidade de ver a floresta em pé. Antes eu derrubava para tirar o sustento, hoje eu vejo o futuro, passei pelo menos 3 décadas.
Falar da paz é falar de esperança, é falar de respeito, é falar de igualdade. Para mim, a paz, ela é Pachamama.
A paz esteve ali, viajando longas distâncias, criando soluções diante do imprevisto. Estava ali, vendo meninos e meninas crescerem, construindo uma educação que faça sentido para quem mora na floresta, ajudando a Amazônia a prosperar.
Botou uma luz no mundo, né? Que se chama FAI, né? Que ela tomou muito iniciativa na pesca do pirarucu, no manejo do pirarucu, né? Tem nos ajudado muito até a data de hoje, né?
Aos meus 15 anos, a paz me ensinou sobre comunicação. Trouxe apoio à minha família e comunidade. Isso mudou minha trajetória, minha vida. Hoje sou comunicadora e também falo pela floresta. A Amazônia é feita de pessoas como eu. A gente é a Amazônia.
Well, this I think gives a flavor of what I see in the COP being a great opportunity to increase concrete action, because we are not going for a COP for pledges. I think that's best. Unfortunately, we are at a tipping point for the Amazon. We are also at a tipping point for the planet. Just to give you one number, out of the last 14 months, 13 months were months of broken records of global temperature, according to the European Union Monitoring Center called Copernicus. Right? So we have crossed the 1.5 degrees in practice. What we saw in Brazil with the floods in Rio Grande do Sul is not something unexpected. It is something that was predicted by IPCC. The droughts in the Amazon also. So there is the science has two sides. One is right and the other is has missed. The right part of the reports of IPCC is that 1.5 is really a threshold that has been crossed, and once crossed it, there will be many, many extreme events and very strong events. But what makes scientists now very puzzled is the fact that this happened much earlier than expected. The worst case scenarios were for the 1.5 degree to be crossed in 2028, and we're doing that in 2024, 4 years earlier. So we're living in an emergency, and I think COP in Belém will follow COPs that are coming from the Middle East with a very strong focus on fossil fuels. I've been to 21 COPs myself, so I'm an old-timer. I know a little bit of this arena. And the COP in Brazil is going to be the COP of nature, and nature and people. And the experience that I shared with you here in this video is an experience of a people-centered approach to deliver nature-based solutions. The Amazon is not only a bunch of plants and animals and water and so forth. It's a place with people. So there are indigenous peoples in voluntary isolation. We have 40% of the region with protection by indigenous peoples of various natures. In Brazil, we divide povos indígenas e populações tradicionais, traditional populations and indigenous people, but putting them all together is about 40%. And it is possible to overcome poverty. It is possible to bring prosperity for those forest guardians. And I think COP30, in my opinion, is an opportunity to build alliances, to strengthen action, bringing together two groups, business and civil society organizations with the backing of science. I think this is a job that we cannot rely on governments, unfortunately. Although governments are very important, but they're too slow, too bureaucratic, and the action that is required now is urgent. And I was, as Renato kindly read my resume, State Secretary of Environment and Sustainable Development for 5 years. And I had a lot of political support from the governor. But the bureaucracy is amazing. It's amazing. I had the will, I had the support, and I couldn't get things done as I expected. Well, I did get a lot of things done. We created 12 million hectares of protected area. We reduced deforestation by 66%. So we got lots of stuff done, but out of gray hair. So that's what made me quit from government and start FAST 16 years ago. I had to resign from my tenure position at the University of São Paulo at the time to take on this endeavor. But I'd like to have more of a conversation rather than a presentation. I think the setting here is one that's more informal, so I'd like to entertain some questions about the COP. But a final word about COPs for those of you. How many of you have been to a COP? Okay, so the majority has not been to a COP. So let me give my definition of a COP. My definition is you have 10%, lots of people, 30,000, 50,000. I think Belém is going to have 100,000. That's my guess, my estimate. 90% of these people are not participating in negotiations, which are very boring. At some time in the past, I did participate in the negotiations, and I remember once we spent a whole morning discussing one paragraph, and the question was about the language, whether it was going to be should, must, shall, or will. And no, some said, no, it cannot be must. It has to be we shall do. The others, no, we should do, and so on, and put a bracket, and so it's very. But that's the business of diplomats. No, it's very important. I am a fan of the United Nations. I think the United Nations has limitations, but it's the best thing that we can have for international dialogue without the limitations that it has. So that's the official COP, which stands for Conference of the Parties. There are 190 plus countries that have signed this Framework Convention. That's the name of it. It comes from Rio. It was signed in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil in 1992. I was there as well. Was a fantastic event. You know, Brazilian diplomacy is extremely well recognized worldwide. So the Brazilian diplomacy is very professional. Itamaraty, which is our Minister for Foreign Affairs, is very sophisticated, has a school and so on. So Brazil plays a very important role. So Brazil is putting together a number of things which are going to be very relevant for the official part. But a word of caution, don't expect too much of any COP, because you're going to be frustrated. I was frustrated many times, but I learned that the problem was not with the COP, the problem was with me, because I had high expectations. But imagine that you're going to come up with a text that on one side of the table is Israel, and on the other side of the table is Iran. On one side of the table is China, and on the other side is the US, and so on and so forth. So it's very hard to come up with a language that unites everybody. So it has to be mild. It cannot be ambitious. So that's the limitation of the Framework Convention, that everybody has to agree. So that's so much for the 10% of the COP. The 90% of the COP is thousands of conferences and meetings of various sorts of business. The presence of business in the COPs is amazing, and is growing every year. I think probably in Glasgow, one was a tipping point in terms of increasing participation of business, but even before, business is playing a very important role, because the change we're talking about includes trillions of dollars. It's not in the order of billions. So we have to change the energy matrix, move away from fossil fuel. By the way, the biggest discussion in the last COP was transition away from or phase down. So there was a huge debate. Should we phase down fossil fuels, or should we transition away? So the final wording was transition, not phase down. Very intense negotiations and so on. So in this COP this year is going to be in Baku in Azerbaijan, which is also an oil-producing country, a very prosperous country that I had never thought of Azerbaijan myself. It was not in my radar screen, but I learned about it. It's similar to Qatar that I visited. Qatar is very prosperous, very sophisticated. We're not talking about backward countries that use burqa. No longer. Women are very... So, business. The other part is civil society and indigenous peoples. I see some friends here from that represent indigenous populations. So indigenous peoples are gaining, os povos indígenas estão ganhando cada vez mais espaço, né, nas COPs. E isso é algo que vai ser muito importante na COP de Belém. We're working together with Minister Sonia Guajajara, who is a fantastic woman. So Brazil has a number of highly qualified representatives. Sonia Guajajara being one, as we call her, Sonia. Sonia is a warrior, is a woman that has led the Association of Indigenous Peoples of Brazil, APIB, for many years, and she's become a minister, and she's very vocal and very active. One thing that we're doing together with her, I was mentioning this to Anna, is to carry out a training program for indigenous leaders to have a participation in the official COP. And we would like everyone that wants to support this to come on board. We're here also to fundraise for more action, because since we're in an emergency, we need more funds. It's as simple as that. No? We have a partnership with Brazil Foundation for this, a 501c3 fund. It's called Fund for Amazon Sustainability. And so that's indigenous peoples. But then we have also all sorts of other, we have quilombolas that are Afro-descendants in the Amazon as well. We have ribeirinhos, we have family farmers, agricultura familiar. So we have a whole array of social groups that are going to participate in the COP. And they will be very active. So I think it's going to be a COP of nature-based solutions with a strong social focus, because Brazil and President Lula in that regard is very vocal, because he is putting at the forefront of the international agenda of Brazil hunger and poverty, as he has done before, because he comes from that world. He suffered hunger, he experienced hunger, and he came from a poor background. So poverty is going to be at the forefront of the Brazilian position, and Brazil being the president of the COP has certain roles in terms of setting up the agenda. Of course, it has to be agreed by everybody else, but these are the things that Brazil will bring forward. Poverty and nature-based solutions. And a fantastic thing which is being done by the Minister of Economy in Brazil, Haddad, who is here in town. This is a plan for ecological transition. Imagine the Ministry of Economy is championing an ecological plan, or a plan for ecological transition. And this is a very ambitious plan that is involving huge investments, change in policies to support and encourage solar energy, wind power, in ecological agriculture, and a number of other things in Brazil. So I think Brazil is going to be able to showcase what is being done, and maybe that can move others to also in that direction. I should also mention that here in the US, since we're here, I think the Inflation Act policy that was enacted by the current President Biden had also big impact in terms of encouraging change in the direction of the carbon footprint of this country. And much more has to be done, but we need to follow in that direction, to follow examples like California in this country, which is doing a lot. I happen to have met Governor Newsom and Senator Josh Hawley. Yeah. And California is doing lots of very interesting stuff on this agenda. So I think it's an opportunity also to get those that are the pioneers on board to encourage each other. I think COP has that role as well. If you talk to somebody and get inspiration of what that person is doing, that inspires you and get the ball rolling, right? So I think this is the agenda, to get the ball rolling, and I think would be great for those of you who have not been to a COP yet, planning to go to Belém. And for those of you who have been to COPs before, make sure you come to Belém prepared to do something. And that's my final message. Let's get together to do things in practice, because the world desperately needs it. Thank you. Let me invite Gabriela, who is part of our team, to come over and help me here entertain the questions. Maybe if you had your cell and write the names of people who would like to talk. And let me invite Renato to sit here as well. então a Gabriela, sit here. Why don't you introduce yourself, Gabi?
Bom dia, good morning. My name is Gabriela, but you can all call me by Gabi. I run the Public Policy Department at FAS. I'm from Manaus, Amazonas, but I live in São Paulo, and I'm very glad to be here and help to facilitate this conversation, to next chat with Vigílio. So, podem levantar a mão, raise your hands, if you have any doubts, questions, interference, okay.
Yes. Good morning, everybody. My name is Landau. I'm from the Eco Restoration Alliance. I'm Dutch, but I also live part of my life in Brazil. I'd like to underline the urgency and the emergency we're in. And I have a very specific reason for it, because I've been studying with some scientists who have been working on the biotic pump theory since 2007. And Anastasia Markelieva, Antonio Nobre, Peter Banyard. And they have basically shown that a large part of the rain-making, wind-making, cloud forming over the Amazon is a self-sustaining system. Which, by the way, as a total cooling, cools the planet by 1.3 times the amount of what we're heating up right now, the planet. So it's actually cooling the planet down more than what CO2 is heating it up. If you remove the forest, and that's basically what is happening now, because it will go into a tailspin, the total additional temperature to the planet will be 2 degrees centigrade, which is not in the IPCC models because the hydrology is not correctly in the IPCC models. So, and it's a self-sustaining process of dieback, and if we don't stop that, and I think I have sort of the contours of a plan which I'd like to discuss with you, then basically it will get out of hand, and it will be a disaster for Brazil, for its water supply, for its food production, etc. So I think I just want to underline that the emergency is very, very great. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Josh. Antonio Nobre is a colleague of mine. We did our undergraduate work together, and I admire a lot of what he does as a scientist. And you're quite right. The simple explanation is the following. We have east to west winds in the Amazon, and the rain that falls, say, in Belém, evaporates and transpires to clouds, but it does so together with perfumes of the forest, called the volatile organic compounds. And as they go to the clouds, that makes the likelihood and the speed of them coming back as rain faster. So there are many cycles. The first one to study this was Enes Salati. Many years ago, he did that with using isotopes. And so the rain falls and comes back in a cycle. And what happens is that when we have more deforestation and more forest fires, this cycle is slowed down. And as it slows down, we have longer dry seasons. And the longer dry seasons, coupled with increasing temperature, which is happening worldwide, includes the risk of fire. And what we're seeing now this year, it is something I just wrote an op-ed at Estado de São Paulo about this. We have this year something awkward. It's less deforestation and more forest fires. Because usually we have more forest fires when there's more deforestation. But the Brazilian government has been successful in reducing more than 50% of deforestation. This year, altogether 70% reduction of deforestation, so it's a big success of the Brazilian government in the last 2 years compared to what happened before. We had a government before that was very anti-environment, openly, and so we have to recognize the role of the current government in reducing deforestation, but we had an explosion of forest fires. And how to explain this is very simple. It is what I've just described, increasing, and what Josh also highlighted. It's increasing dry season with higher temperatures. So a fire that would be a small fire becomes a big fire. That's it. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Virgilio. I'm Rebecca with the Brazil Foundation. Virgilio, we have heard a lot about new initiatives of the private sector to bring investors to buy up large tracts of land and replant, sometimes using eucalyptus or other trees that grow faster to capture carbon. The proposal is that this carbon recapture will really help in reducing the effects of climate change. But we don't hear too much about how those plans and initiatives take into account the populations that are living on those large tracts of land. How can we work with you, with FAS, to ensure that the populations, the traditional populations that are on the land, are contemplated and benefit from these large initiatives?
That's a very good point, and a complex one. First of all, if you move from pasture to an eucalyptus plantation, there is a net gain. That's something that is plain clear. So it is positive from a carbon standpoint. The problem comes when the expansion of eucalyptus plantation displace small landowners because of increasing the price of land. And this has happened in eucalyptus plantations for pulp and paper in southern Brazil. Brazil is a big producer of pulp and paper. When I was a professor of forestry at USP, this was part of the curricula of the students. And the question is the scale, the dimension. Oftentimes people associate eucalyptus with something which is bad, but it's a fantastic tree. I remember the Nobel Prize, Peace Nobel Prize, Wangara Maathai, in Africa, and her pitch was to have women planting small lots of eucalyptus to provide firewood to their household economy. So eucalyptus is great. The question is the monoculture that displaces local and small farmers, and that's not an easy thing to manage because it's sort of market-driven. What I think would be the most appropriate way of capturing carbon is through agroforestry systems that are a combination of various species that planted together. This was a discipline that I used to teach when I was a professor at the university. And you can have a diverse set of crops that are more resilient because climate change also affects trees. So if you have a fruit tree, for example, Tucumã, this year Tucumã in Amazonas, Tucumã is a palm tree that produces fantastic seed that one eats. And it's not fruiting this year because of climate. So having multiple crops is good because this crop doesn't work well, the other one works better. So I think agroforestry system using assentamentos, which are the settlements, make more sense from a holistic approach. What we're doing in terms of carbon is to encourage villages, such as those that you have visited, to have agroforestry systems to improve their diet with a focus on nutrition of kids. And this is an agenda that is very important because schools, public schools, often have a procurement process that results in buying or in purchasing highly industrialized food because it's easier to transport the logistics, and also the system works in that direction, sometimes not very with very good ethics as well. So we're encouraging that agroforestry systems to improve nutrition and also sequester carbon. The question is whether eucalyptus use more. Yes, the answer is yes. But similar to sugarcane. Sugarcane also uses a lot of water. All species that grow fast use lots of water. If a species grows slow, it's part of the photosynthesis. No? So, and having a huge monoculture over thousands and thousands of hectares, that has an impact on watersheds. Whereas if it's a small plantings, that doesn't have the same impact. So it's a question of scale. So eucalyptus is not a villain in itself. It's the large-scale monoculture that creates the problem, the social problem and the hydrology problem.
Hi, Professor. Good morning, everyone. So as you can hear it, I'm sadly not Brazilian, I'm French. I'm working for a company named Morpho, so we are restoring forest in Brazil with biodiversity, 20 species, resilient forest. But there is one point. You said that this COP would be an NBS COP with a strong social aspect of it. At the same time, we know that the government claimed to restore 20 million hectares of land by 2030, but for the moment, only 2% roughly have been restored. So do you think that this COP could be a chance to accelerate this? Could it be a forest COP, or is it too late?
Well, nature-based solutions include restoration, right? And Brazil is making a huge effort in that direction. The Brazilian Development Bank, called BNDES, has set aside something like 1 billion reais for this activities. Brazil has issued green bonds that have mobilized $2 billion for various things. And what I hear in New York in the Climate Week is a lot of appetite of the financial sector. We have a colleague here from Bank of Tokyo. There is a lot of appetite to mobilize lots of funds. Eugenia, whom is very likely to, she's part of our team of collaborators, and she introduced us to a couple of billionaires in the US who are partnering with investment funds in blended finance mechanisms that are going to deliver or are planning to deliver large-scale investment, and we need more, certainly much more. It's not very easy to do restoration, and putting my head of a professor here, people make confusion. People have missed one class, which is the distinction between restoration and recovery of forest cover. Restoration means planting the forest or managing natural regeneration in a way that goes similar to the original forest. Never equal, but aims to become similar to the original forest. What we are talking about in most cases is not restoration. It's recovery of forest cover through agroforestry systems, which do not aim to go to this to the diversity level of a primary forest. I think the best bet for me is restoring indigenous lands. Eu acho que é o tema de restauração e recuperação florestal de áreas indígenas degradadas. There are many areas of indigenous peoples that have been invaded by illegal loggers and cattle farmers and so on, that now have been expelled. So now we have these abandoned pastures. So there we have a great opportunity to recover forests, do restoration as well as recovery at low cost. And you don't need to plant trees in many cases, just manage the natural regeneration that occurs spontaneously.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. It's Vinicius here, work at Deloitte in Applied AI. But I was wondering, you spoke a lot about the bureaucracy, right? Is there any institution, let's say state, private, needed in Brazil with focus primarily to reforestation and fight on the climate in Brazil, independent usually of the government, not too much, but more from the private system, like BNDES is the development bank in Brazil, right? It became larger than the World Bank, right, in terms of funding. So it's got somewhat successful in it. Doesn't we need something similar that kind of skip away a little bit the bureaucracy and takes action?
A very good point. We have here somebody from BTG, right? O BTG, Pactual, tá aqui. BTG is a Brazilian private bank, and BTG has a program on restoration, right? And we're going to meet a colleague of yours this afternoon, and it's mobilizing a significant amount of funding. There are many actors in the private sector, investment funds, that are looking at that. Brazil, in a way, has a huge opportunity now because it has a stable government, democratic government, or not the government only, but the institutions. The institutions in Brazil are very solid compared to other developing countries, and even compared to developed countries too. We have resisted attempts of military coup, and the Supreme Court has been very active. I think we have an institution that is a framework that is very solid, that reduces risk. So for investment banks like BTG, and here I'm just mentioning because we have a friend here from that, but other banks, the three largest banks of Brazil have signed a letter, Itaú, Bradesco, and Santander, committing to do things in the Amazon. They have moved a little bit, not as much as we would have hoped, but at least they're pointing in that direction. We needed more pressure of civil society, so these actors move quicker. We also need more pressure on the billionaires. The top 2,000 billionaires in the world have assets over $8 trillion. 2,000, 8 trillion. This money cannot land, so it stays in the web. We have to do something, which is to help that land on nature. We have to take care of nature. And here, I think, indigenous peoples have a great role, because it's not only the land that they protect, it's the paradigm. It's how to relate to Mother Nature, how to relate to Pachamama. So one thing that we're doing with our colleagues, indigenous colleagues of Ecuador, and that's the Sacred Water Alliance, is to create a school where we have indigenous peoples teaching non-indigenous about how to relate to nature. And they have a wisdom, a different ethics, a different morale. And I think we have a lot to learn from them. And I think the role of indigenous people is also going to be something very unique of this COP in Brazil.
I have a question. Hi. Okay, hi. I'm Caroline Bolto. I come from my background is in finance. And I'm doing a mangrove restoration and preservation project in the Amazon, in the state of Pará. So my question here, yeah, it's a challenge, especially coming from finance. Anyway, my point here is the way we see it, it's when investors look into the Brazilian market, it's great, it's a lot of opportunities. But on the regulatory side, it's quite confusing. And I know the government is trying a lot, a lot to kind of to manage, right? And to make the market a little bit more transparent for those who want to invest from abroad. Last week there was a conference, WACA conference, Luxembourg. A lot of the government members were there. A lot of discussion, but so far nothing has been done on that front, right? Like concrete. So what's your take on that? I mean, how do you see the importance of regulation for foreign investors who are looking to invest in Brazil? Especially in the carbon industry.
Well, first of all, I'd love to talk more with you about the restoration of mangroves in Pará. We are just with that agenda in the design phase, so it would be great to learn from you what you're doing. And the second point is that you're quite right. Brazil is a very bureaucratic country. That's the downside. We have many upsides. We are a happy country. We are warm, and we have lots of sun, lots of nature, but we have a very bureaucratic system. As far as investment goes, there is a will of the Ministry of Economy to work in the direction of facilitating investments. There is an upcoming law that will deal with the carbon market, and this is going to be approved according to what is being said in the next couple of weeks, right after the election, because there's bipartisan agreement, not bipartisan, multi-partisan agreement of both chambers to vote that. So as far as carbon, I think that's going to be a relevant step forward. In terms of investment, although it looks bureaucratic, I think the Chamber of Commerce can help in that direction, not only the chamber here, but the chamber in Brazil to facilitate. It's not impossible. I come from a place which is Manaus. Manaus has all the big industries as a free trade zone that have been operating there for decades. It has a GDP of about $35 billion of industrial output. So big companies doing business regularly, so it's possible. You have to have a good advisory, good lawyers and so on, and you find your way through the bureaucracy. And don't get desperate. Take a chamomile tea eventually, and go to the beach, have a caipirinha, and next day things are likely to be sorted out. And then we have jeitinho, which is something very unique of Brazil too. Sometimes the bureaucracy says nobody say, "Oh, come on, this is me. I just arrived from New York, and I need to get this done tomorrow." Okay. And then next somebody will say, "Okay, my love, okay, querida." So that's very Brazilian too. So that's the upside.
Hello everyone, my name is Luisa. I'm from Megedu. We are an education institution that's focused on broadband connectivity for public schools around Brazil. And Virgilio, I would like to ask you, sometimes it's a hard question because we are hearing a lot about the economic factors around COP30, and we haven't heard a lot about the social layer around our next steps. And if you could, it's a very broad question, I'm very sorry about it. It's because us in the educational sector are as well trying to figure out our way around this discussion. So I'm sorry in advance for the broad question, but how do you see the social layer, especially the education sector, and how can we provoke more discussions around making education better and therefore contributing as well for climate adaptation and resilience, because we are already facing the consequences for climate change, and students do not have the access to the entire year, right? Like they're having less days of school. I forgot how you say ano letivo. I'm sorry, I forgot the word. But yeah, the school year, thank you. So it's a broad question, and I'd like you to comment on the power of the school in the community for next steps on COP30. Thank you.
Well, I would also like to talk to you more about this because we're very engaged in using internet for education in public schools in the Amazon. I think schools have a big agenda related to COP. I had a conversation yesterday or the day before yesterday, I can't remember, with the Secretary of Education of Pará, which is the home of Belém, the state of Belém, and he's planning a number of things. He's talking to Anna about this as well. The universities are also planning to lots of things for the COP. So there's a lot of action, and I think we could say that this is already a positive result of COP. It's generating interest. People are studying, looking at the problems, looking at solutions, bringing their demands and so on. And I think we can partner in this and do things together with not only the Secretary of State of Pará, who has invited FAS to contribute to that agenda, but also taking advantage of the existing consortium. There is a consortium of our Amazon governors that bring together not only the governors themselves, but also the secretaries of education, health, and environment, and so on. So that's an interesting institutional framework that we could use to do something across states. And I think it's probably the most important agenda of all, because it's the next generation that is at risk. So they have to be engaged. But then there is a word of caution, how to do that, because you cannot portray a scenario that leads to eco-anxiety problems, because kids, if confronted with the fact that we're going to have a disaster, what's going to be the psychological impact of that? So it's very tricky how to craft this message. And I think a very interesting challenge and an important challenge is how to message this. What's the narrative that we have to use in order to highlight the emergency on one hand, but also, as Pope Francis always reminds us, to keep hope alive. So I think it's very important to keep hope alive, to say that this is not the end of things. There is a chance. There's a lot of resilience. Nature is very vulnerable on one hand, as I've described and Josh pointed out, but nature is also very resilient. It's amazing how forests come back spontaneously. Only if you can protect fire. We have some colleagues here who work with fire. So if we can prevent fire, and preventing fire is relatively simple. It's environmental education. It's to create good management practices, so whenever people do shift in agriculture, they make control of the use of fire. Or, even better, when they stop using fire through agroecological systems like permaculture and so on. So there are solutions, we know the solutions. We just need to increase action. And again, I'd like to finish with a message calling for action. We are no longer in a time to make pledges, we're in a time to go to the field and do things. Let's plant a tree, symbolically speaking. Let's work with school teachers. We have a fantastic work with teachers producing educational material on their ecosystems, on their environment, where they live. And I finish with this story. I was in office as secretary, and we were inaugurating a school in the interior of Amazonas, in the Rio Purus, com o Rio Tapauá, with the one black water, the other white water. And then there was inauguration, all the speeches, the governor, the mayor, blah, blah, blah. And then I came to the director of the school and said, Professor, please, do you have any discipline talking about why the water is black and the other is white? And then she said, no. I said, second question, is there any class about the species of fish being different in these two different rivers? And this was a village of fishermen, Foz do Tapauá. And they said, no. And then I made the third question, is there any class on management of fisheries, because this is the heart of the economy of this village. He said, no. And then I went to the library of this school, which was brand new. And then I saw these fantastic books of chemistry, very complicated chemistry, literature, fine literature, José Luís do Rego, Machado de Assis, and etc. Very fine. Big history books, but not a single book about the trees of the Amazon, the fish of the Amazon, or the ecology, and so on. So that prompted me to create a program in Amazonas, bringing together the Secretary of Environment and Secretary of Education to produce material. And that's what we're now doing at FAS, out of government, to produce material so that school teachers can have a very simple class. And this is also something that we've learned, that you should not expect the teacher to be highly interested to go on the internet, do a research, and then come up with a class. That happens, but that's not the majority. So what we have to offer is something ready. Here is a roadmap. You do this, and then this is the exercise, and blah, blah, blah. This is how you evaluate. So we have produced a lot of that, and that's what we intend to do more in the future. And it would be a pleasure to interact with you. And to keep time, I think we're about time. Let me hand it over to Renato to close the session. And thank you so much.
Before I finish, I want to thank everybody who came and who are here. Just for the lady, I miss her name, there are no difficult questions, there are only difficult answers. But Professor Virgilio, thank you so much. It was very clarifying what is going on in this climate world about COP30, and I think we all started getting packed, make reservations to attend. And so thank you so much, and we in the Chamber have a pleasure, and actually is one of our functions to assist anyone who comes in relationship with Brazil and the United States. And hopefully we have a panel like that, not a panel, an audience like that with these billionaires who will attend, because I think this is the main issue, where to get the money, how to get the money to fund all these projects that are great. Thanks so much, Professor.